Welcome to another episode of Life's Ambition Podcast. Today we are joined by an aspiring woman who has gone through many obstacles in her life to become the successful and curious owner of a business that she is today. Without further ado, June Barnard. So June, how are we doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're coming to the end of the school year, so things are a little bit different. It's crazy to think about. Absolutely crazy to think about. How's life treating you?
Life is good. I have relocated to Florida, Palm Coast, Florida, and I got to tell you, I don't miss the snow or anything like that. So it's all good. I'm really enjoying it.
I got you. Yeah, for me growing up in Chicago, we would have plenty of days where it was like -50 wind chill, and that's not even included onto the temperature. So the school buses would break down. So totally get that. Totally get that. I wanted to talk a little bit about your history and your upbringing. What was it like for you? Like, where did you grow up? Kind of what were things happening at the time? And what kind of brought you into your career of today?
Well, I grew up on the northwest side of Chicago, and I had let's say, a rocky childhood up until the age 9. I lived in either with my grandma, sometimes with my mother, and then when I was about 5 and until 9, I lived in those days that there were foster homes, but this wasn't a foster home. This was a couple who would take in kids to stay with them. So I lived with these people for over 4 years. And I went to several grammar schools because you'd move and all that jazz. When I was 9, my mother met a man who my brother and I say rescued us. And he adopted both my brother and I. And then from the age of 9 to 18, I lived with my mother for the first time. And then my adopted father. So it was, I get the violin story, and all the rest, but I survived. But I got married at 18.
Really?
So I met a boy when I was 15, and I got married at 18. I was going to go to college, but I didn't. And instead, I took a night course and became a dental assistant. And I did dental assist. I got married, did dental assisting for several years. So yeah, I there was no real gap, so to speak. So I'm dental assisting and this and that, So yeah, it was.
Well,
I survived,
how did you find yourself? Yeah, how did you find yourself into dental assistantship? Did you just this is kind of a cool opportunity, I'm going to go check it out? Or
yeah, I was thinking about that because I knew we were going to talk, and I really don't recall what motivated me to do that. I just knew that it was something that I could get a certificate in 6 months, and I went downtown, took an L, and of course in those days you could do that in Chicago and survive. I would take an L and go downtown a couple nights a week, I think, after school. I was in a work program in school. Yeah. So, yeah, I thought about it. It was just one of those things that happened, and I pursued it, and which is one of the things that I think we'll talk about as we go on, is that there was an opportunity. It sounded interesting, and I took a risk, and I did it. Yeah. Even at 18, what did I know? But I did, and that's how that happened. It was kind of like that throughout my whole life, to be honest with you. Opportunities came, and I had a decision to make. Do I go? Do I take this or what? So I never really considered myself a risk taker, but at this age, I look back and I see I probably was more of a risk taker than I ever realized.
Yeah, and did you find throughout your career that connections were key for you? Because I had someone named Justin that was on earlier, and he talked a lot about how he moved from one position to the next based on just the opportunities that were presented to him. And so this would be he moved from literally a worker at a restaurant into working as an animal assistant into a research lab. So it was like a completely different shift. And you had you had the option to work as a dental assistant. Like, did you
Right.
find that your career totally diverged right after that, or what kind of happened? Because at
No,
18, you're really young into
I
it.
stayed in it for a few years, but there were
Hmm.
no benefits. In those days, dental assistants, there were no benefits. And now I'm married, and I wanted to find something that had benefits to it. And my husband worked for Illinois Bell,
Hmm.
and there was a job right near home for, I guess, customer service rep. And
Yeah.
I got it. I took it. And there were benefits. But in those days, I got pregnant. And in those days, I hate to keep saying those days, but it was a long time ago. In those days, if you were pregnant, you had to quit at 7 months. They would not let you work any longer. And I mean, I wasn't in the
Really?
public eye. I was a customer service rep on the phone. I learned a
Yeah.
lot. I learned a lot about taking notes and conversations, which stayed with me throughout my entire life. The old spiral notebook, so there were things I learned that
Hmm.
that were beneficial. And again, you don't even realize some of these things while you're going through it. But I also discovered I enjoyed talking to people.
Yeah.
And that continued again as I would look at opportunities, or opportunities would come away. Remember, I had no education other than 6 months of a
Mhm.
dental assistant. So everything I learned was life experiences. And so I did that, got pregnant. Then I didn't work for a few years.
Yeah.
So that was the change there. We moved to Wisconsin to work at a Christian camp. And then eventually, several years later, we came back to Chicago. I went back into dental assisting because that's all I knew. I mean,
Hmm.
I wasn't. So I did that, and then I got it. I loved it, and I thought, well, I'm going to become a hygienist, right? Well, that was school. That was a couple of years. I had a little girl, and I thought, and I wasn't great in school. I was like, yeah, I go. When you meet a boy at 15, you don't think about studying. You think about getting married. At least back in the 60s, we did. I read an ad in the paper for an administrative assistant, and I thought, now I like the title of that. And it was at a bank. And it talked about one of the requirements wasn't the education, was excellent communication skills. And I thought,
Oh, there we go
this
then.
girl's got
Yeah.
that. I can talk, no problem. I walked in, got hired on the spot. And
Really?
yeah, I had one interview. The guy I mean, that just doesn't happen even then.
Mhm.
So I was like thrilled.
Yeah, one
I
of my
stayed in
buddies
bank.
just had a 5-part interview. Like, he had
Yeah,
5
no,
separate interviews for
yeah.
one position.
I can remember my husband was waiting in the car, and I came out and I said, I got a job, and they're paying me $14,000 a year. Well, that was a lot of money for me in 19, whatever it was. I stayed in banking, and I'll tell you what happened. If you want to ask me a question and stop me anytime, go ahead.
Oh, all good. Keep going. Keep going.
What happened in banking was, again, I had no interest in financial industry. It just wasn't there.
Mhm.
What I enjoyed when I first got that job was dealing with different people, all these smart MBAs and all the rest. And I would always be on the phone with big time customers, helping them with wire transfers and all the rest.
Mhm.
I came in as an administrative assistant. When I left banking, I was a vice president, and I handled, I think, 4 branches.
Holy
And
cow.
when I look back, that's when, you saw that I went to DePaul for a while. So
Yeah.
what happened was, everybody, you're surrounded by nothing but MBAs and all these hotshot young boys, not women in that higher position.
No.
Um,
Oh,
but I wanted to get, I wanted to, they wanted to promote me, but they couldn't because I didn't have a degree.
really?
So when we talked about it, they said, well, I'll tell you how we can get around that. If you start pursuing a degree.
Mm,
So that's all I did. I took a couple of night classes at DePaul in their life program. It was all about life experience. That's what kind of got you credit for certain things.
yeah.
Once I did that, they promoted me to officer. Nobody ever asked later on about your education. They didn't care. They just had
Yeah.
to be able to get past that. And my career in banking, I have to tell you, it wasn't the financial end of it. And I've discovered this about myself over the years. I love dealing with people. And that's what got me promoted. Okay, over the years, my ability to communicate, my ability to listen, and I was a nice person, and
Yeah.
there are a lot of not nice people out there in the world, and so it was refreshing. So it was not. People say when you look at my whole life, well, you never got a degree. How did you get to where you're getting? And I often think, yes, some of it's opportunity. Some opportunities I didn't take, and that's okay. But, that's life. You make your decisions, you decide what you want to do, and doors are either opened or they're closed. And we have to decide if we're going to put our hand on that doorknob and open it or not.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how I made it through banking. I was very blessed, but I worked hard. I was a hard worker,
Yeah. Did you
I
ever
got in
find?
early.
Yeah. Did you ever find yourself at a disadvantage at all with not going to school, or would you say with all your life experience that you were able to take that into consideration with doing the banking, and you thought that was much more important?
Well, it was. I couldn't afford it at that point to go back to school. It was a disadvantage, and I look at today, and I think the June of back in the 70s and 80s, would she be able to do what she did and accomplish what she did? It's a lot harder now because they don't just say, as long as you're pursuing, we'll promote you. So it would be much more difficult today, but I have to say that as much of a disadvantage as it was, I didn't let it stop me. Again, doors would be closed, but that's okay. No, but yeah, it can be. And I don't know what kids would do today. That's why I think it's so important. Like you take yourself, it's so important to think about what you really like to do. And it doesn't have to be an occupation. Okay.
No.
I'm not saying what occupation, what do you want to be when you grow up? Who knows? Nobody knows. I mean, we can hope and dream and all the rest, but it's more about what do you, if you were to ask somebody that knows you well and you said to them, what is it about me? What do you think I do well? What do you think is, you start to find out, oh, well, you're a good communicator, or you're very analytical, or I've always known. You start to find out things about your personality. That's, what really gets you going. Are you a game player? Well, whatever. But that's how you start to pursue, you get curious about yourself and curious about what you like to think about or what you do and what your strengths are.
My uncle, one of my favorite quotes from him is that he says, you never know where you're going to be in 5 years. And if you do, you're doing something wrong. And that's just because you should be able to take advantage of the different opportunities that are presented to you. And I was wondering how you feel about that quote because you very much take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you. You said that you let a few pass, but you make the most of what you can, whether that's being communicative in your financial role. Like that's something you very much look forward to. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on that kind of saying.
Well, okay. I don't know that we're doing, I don't like to think we're doing something wrong. I think there's a couple of issues here. One is you have to be open. There has to be a certain openness in your way of living and thinking when these opportunities come. If we start thinking we're doing something wrong, to me, that's such a negative thought. I think, and I talk a lot about taking risks. I don't mean jumping off a bridge and seeing if you can swim. I'm talking about risks that you're not afraid to fail. I'm going to take that risk. I'm going to go ahead and take that job as a dental assistant. I don't have any banking experience, but I'm going to risk it. I'm going to risk it and do it. And life is like that, and in today's world, it's got to be extremely difficult to be able, number one, to take a risk because you're so afraid of failing and the consequences of it. But if you let that cripple you, you're not going to be able to be open. Be open to what's in front of you and what life is. I don't know what I could be dead in 5 years for all I know, but that's okay. I don't buy that. No, we're not making mistakes. We're learning. Okay.
Yeah.
We're experiencing failures, but we keep going because we learn from them, right? What is it? Electricity? How many times did he try it?
No, I think that's great.
That's my different philosophy.
Yeah, I get that. And you made the switch, not totally sidetracked, but you made the switch from banking over to your own type of practice, whether that's in the boutique category and even so on and so forth. How did you come up with that kind of switch? Because that's a total career change.
Yeah, there you go. Again, opportunity. I was in banking and I was a VP, and one of my clients was a CPA, and he came in to my office one day and we were talking, and he said, "Oh, my wife is selling her business," he said. And it's a little place downtown on Michigan, Wabash, near the Auditorium Theater and all the rest. And he proceeded to say, well, it was decorations and props, and he's going on and on. Well, what was going on in my life at the time is, number one, I had been divorced and remarried, and I was recently married. And number two, banking was changing. The pressure to sell, the pressure to meet quotas. And at this point in my life, I had a new life I was starting in the home. I knew we were being sold, and I was going to go to another bigger bank because we were a community bank. And I thought, I don't want to do that. I really don't. I love what I'm doing, and I was fortunate enough to be married to someone who said, go for it. Check it out. Let's go see what he's talking about. I said, I'd love to be my own boss. I'd love to. So I did. And I was, again, as I say, fortunate enough to have someone to support me to make that change. Because I was making very good money in those days as a VP. So this meant not making very good money and learning to do it. And I discovered that I had another talent. My mother's always been very crafty in more reasons than one, but she's a crafty woman. And I discovered I had that too. So I bought the business. I took somebody from banking with me, a backroom person. We did. In fact, my claim to fame was that in, 1999, maybe, I had a website with a shopping cart. Who did that? And then Google came in and interviewed me because my business tripled in a year.
Dang.
When I started doing Google ads, paying for Google. So I did really well. I mean, it was a very, our money making thing was fake food, artificial food. I had a license plate that said fake food.
Nice.
And who knew? Did I grow up and say, yeah, I want to? No. But again, the thing that I discovered was each one of these moves and opportunities, when I was open, had an openness to look at it and think about it, the talents or the gifts, let's just say the gifts that I had, flourished. I learned more. I had a better education than I could have ever gotten, quite frankly, had I gone to college and hid away for 4 years. I wasn't a good student, so it really wasn't something that, that I had this great passion for. Other than
so
that everybody else did.
For people who don't necessarily know what they're doing then going into school, is this kind of the steps you would recommend to them, whether that's trying out what's out there to see what makes them, I guess, creative, or find what they're passionate about? Because everyone has certain qualities that excel in certain environments. Would you say being able to take advantage of those opportunities is probably the most important if people don't necessarily know what they want to do?
I do think so. I mean, you don't want to jump around. First of all, most of us have to have some source of income to survive, unless you've got somebody paying your bill. So pick something or get something, however it happens for you, that you can allow yourself, maybe it's not what you love, but allow yourself to, on your own time, seek out, volunteer, ask questions. Oh my God. I'm sure, Drew, you've discovered that if you ask questions, you can learn so much more than reading a book at that point. There are people out there, lots and lots of great information and knowledge to share if they were just asked. We just we don't ask enough questions. Look at our kids. How many hundreds of questions they ask every day. They're constantly learning. And I don't care if you're 75 or if you're 18, ask questions. Not in a, what's the word? Asking questions like an interrogation kind of question. Ask questions of interest. People love to talk about themselves. So,
100%. Because I had a work experience, and I talked about this work experience a decent amount, where I went to Wyoming to work on a type 1 fire, which is like the most resource intensive fire for the U.S. Forest Service. And I thought I had a pretty good idea because I took a few GIS classes, and I thought, okay, this will easily translate to what I have to do. I wished I asked the right questions to be able to know what is happening, because there's just so much information to digest when I was there, and so many new techniques that I was learning that I didn't know. And for anyone that's listening, is like, GIS is all about map making. So Google Maps is my best example for it, where you can interact with each building instead of just having it as a GPS to go where you want it to go. And I was wondering, for you, is there any question that you wish someone had asked you, or a question that you wish you asked someone in your experiences? Because you obviously were a VP at a bank, and then you were your own boss for a boutique company where you sold fake foods, I guess you could say. That's like your big coming moment. Is there any question that you wish someone asked you, or you asked someone else?
Well, you think about it after people are gone. I think, my grandmother, I should have asked her more questions about the family and traits, because DNA is DNA, but you find that you learn, you know what, that runs in the family. No wonder I enjoy drawing. No wonder I'm good at this. So in the family side, ask before it's too late. On the professional side, I think the question to ask, do I regret it? No. What I regret is not asking more questions. What question? I couldn't tell you. But your frame of mind wasn't, well, if you ask a question, here's the problem. You ask a question, people think you're stupid. you don't know the answer to that. So you want to make sure your questions is related to the subject or something that about them, or,
Mm-hmm.
that they've got some knowledge. That's the problem we have in school today. Kids do not ask questions for fear of failure and being rejected.
Oh
And
yeah.
as we carry that into our adulthood, we carry that right along with us. And we shouldn't fear. We should explore it.
Mm.
Questions are
Do you feel like social media played a role in that and kids being afraid to ask those kind of questions?
well, I'm sure social media has had a tremendous effect on all of our lives, kids and
Mm.
us. But I believe that in the classroom, um, the educators haven't. Here's one of the issues. They don't have time for kids to ask questions because they've got a course. They got to get this through this. They got to get through that. So they don't. They say, later. Not this is not a time for questions, and that's not the way it should be done. We
No.
should be able to not be so concerned about. Yeah, they got to learn how to add. They got to learn how to divide. They need to know their history, but giving them the opportunity to say, well, why did George Washington do whatever?
Yeah.
Maybe that's an opportunity for them to learn. So
Yeah.
I think that's what we need. We need to encourage that, not only in our kids, but in our own lives.
Yeah, and staying on the learning aspect of things, did you find that you were able to grow and develop more with being the boss, or would you say like with the boutique company, or would you say you were able to grow and develop more with being the VP of a bank company? Because in that
Um,
case, you had someone above you keeping you under the reins,
right,
but also as the boss, you're being exposed to all these challenges, so your creativity is running wild.
right. Well, yeah, but you learn that when you work for banking or whatever industry, and you've got a boss,
Mhm.
you don't have to worry about the percentage majority of the time. You don't have to worry about who gets fired, who does this, or bills being paid
Yeah,
as the owner, and you have employees. You have to make sure there's enough to get paid. So totally different pressures, um, but it but it's okay. It's okay.
yeah.
It's
Hmm.
you just learn as you go, and hopefully you develop more interpersonal skills in dealing with those situations, dealing with
Gotcha.
being the boss, dealing with being an employee. I mean, we have to learn to adjust our where we're at and the people that we have to deal with.
Gotcha. When you talk, it makes you sound very curious about everything that's going on around you with the different opportunities. And it brings me into my next point about the curiosity to create foundation. And I
Yeah,
was wondering if you could provide the story behind that, because
I can.
you and plenty of others are obviously setting the forefront for teachers and being able to think differently.
I'd be happy to. So I'm owning my own business, and I had been married, and the man I married was an attorney, and
Hmm.
he was an attorney for a gentleman who had made a fortune importing Beck's beer. And he was when both the people passed away, both Driscolls passed away. This foundation was fully funded, and my late husband, then, I mean, he was alive then, obviously, he took it over. Then, so I was involved with him on the sidelines. I'd go with him if he'd go to visit somebody that they were going to give a grant to. So I was very curious about what was available and who they gave money to. My husband became
Yeah.
ill, and he had cancer, and we talked about it, and I said, let me take it over. It's going to eventually die in 2020 because we were giving all the money away. It was formed in the
Mhm.
80s. So 2020 was like long, long time. I took over the foundation when he passed away. And one of the things, he was quite a bit older than I was. And I kept saying, I don't want to end this. I sold my business. I got out of my business. Again, this is not an educated woman who knows all this stuff about, grants and all the rest. So I tried to surround myself with people who did. We didn't ask for grants. We gave grants. Curiosity was still part of the mission, original mission, but it was for researchers. We did a lot in the medical field for researchers. And I thought, yeah, we've done some great stuff. But I was worried. I had a passion maybe, or a burden or an interest in the kids' curiosity. And as I look back at it, so then we changed our focus to after school programs, to ignite curiosity, to ignite creativity. And when I think about why I wanted to do that, I look back at my childhood and, I couldn't be curious. I could be, but I couldn't do anything with it because I could be heard. I could be seen, but not heard. I couldn't be open about how I was feeling. So I went through all of these, and risk taking, forget about it. My biggest risk was, I don't know, going to Riverview, 5 cent day. I know I'm old, I know. So I thought, you know what? Why wasn't I more curious? And why am I not? Well, now I see it's the environment that I lived in. And I let that stifle me for quite a while. So we started doing after school programs, worked with the YMCA, worked with some of the Chicago public schools. But again, we're a private foundation. And I was talking with my daughter, who was an educator for over 20 some years. And she said, Mom, you're doing a great work, but you're only reaching, a handful of kids, 30 kids after school, 40 kids, whatever. If we could get to the teachers, that would make a difference. That one teacher could reach 1,000 kids in her career or whatever. Yeah. So that's when I said, okay, well, I'm not an educator, girl. I've been able to get this far on my good looks, but I'm not an educator. So I said, you take it and see what you can do with it. And that's how, so then Driscoll helped fund this new one to get them on their feet. And their focus, Curiosity to Create, was really built for the teacher. It's teachers helping other teachers in their quest to be more curious and creative and bring it into the classroom. So that's how that started. But we're also finding that we still have this hunger to work with the kids. So they had just written a book, and it's for kids. So the Curious Creators Club, I think it's called. So yeah, it happens, But again, I knew my limits. Here's a point to always make about decisions and places and things you do. Know your limitations. I had this tremendous burden to do X, Y, and Z, but I did not have the expertise. I was not an educator. I wasn't a teacher. I had the vision and the passion, but she had the ability to get it going. And that's important. So you surround yourself. Running the foundation, well, I didn't know anything about being a CEO and president of a foundation. You surround yourself with people that do. So.
Gotcha. And how do you inspire people to be creative? Like, what kind of techniques are you guys showing people?
Yeah, me personally, I try to do it in my conversations on a daily basis, involved with other people. I don't have as much contact with individuals as I used to. So I have to do it on a personal level and maybe on occasion with some things I'm involved with on the Driscoll Foundation. But there's four core points. I try to remind people to always be curious. Be curious, ask questions, and then be open and willing to look at think about, pursue opportunities and people, I mean, situations. And then the risk taker. So you got the C, curiosity, the O, openness,
Mhm.
and the R for risk taker. And as we discussed before, I feel that's more in the don't be afraid to fail category. Take a
Yeah.
risk. And then the E is embracing the challenge in front of you that's presented to you. Embrace it. Go for it. And see what happens. Now, common sense, you gotta have C. Common sense and curiosity. But we need common sense and we need to think about things. But if we let the too much thinking about it, the good old devil can play havoc on your head and say, oh, you're stupid. You can't do this. What do you think you're doing? Somebody might discover you don't know what you're doing. So you have thoughts like that. So I encourage people personally on a daily life and then hopefully in whatever other way I can. And then I've done so over the years. So.
Well, I think it's really cool to see how all your experiences have kind of led you to the C2C, because as a dental assistant, you're developing those communicative skills and being able to take risks. And then when you worked at the bankers or like as an administrative assistant, you're developing those interpersonal communication skills. And then you're also, when you're working your way up, you're starting to get the idea of what a grant is and what the process is behind it. So you're surrounding yourself there. Yeah. And then you're able to develop your skills into the boutique area. So then you become your boss and be able to promote businesses. And then eventually to the Driscoll Foundation, where you're handing out those grants. And then now you're here at the C2C, where you're back into the interpersonal communication. Do you ever just look back and you're like, holy cow, everything kind of just happened for a reason to get where I am today?
Oh, absolutely. You can't live, again, 75 years and not have lots to look back on. Sometimes over the years, I would kind of blame I feel sorry for myself because of the childhood I had, I mean, after 9, my adopted father and my mother were wonderful. But the danger in looking back sometimes can keep you from going forward. So when I look back, I make sure I see the blessings, the decisions that were made that I had no control over, but still worked out for whatever reason. I'm a spiritually minded woman, so I believe that God has a plan. But again, I'm back to the door. If he opens the door, you got to put your hand on that knob, or otherwise, he can't open. He's not going to open it for you. It doesn't happen by osmosis. So yes, I do look back. It's a long answer, and I'm thankful. Would I change anything? No, because you know what? I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I had done something different. Yeah. So you just kind of have to accept it with thankfulness,
Do any of these past experiences impact with what you want to do in the future? Because it seems like you always like giving back to a community. And I was wondering, how are you going to continue to do so? Is that still through the Driscoll Foundation and even with C2C? Or are there any other ideas that you have in mind to give back?
We do have a scholarship fund that I started, the June D. Barnard Scholarship Fund for C2C. Donations to that will go towards teachers who want to take some of the seminars that are available through Curiosity to Create and Creative Teachers Network. That it's all part of C2C. So that's what I try to do today. I don't by just giving to that, and anybody can give to that. And on a personal note, no, I'm not looking for any new job, but I write. I love to write. Yeah. And, I've got 4 unfinished books, but, it's good for the soul. Maybe it's a mystery. I don't know what's going to happen, but that's what I'm doing now. And I find it fun. And so, it's really, no, I'm not going to. I get, you're on LinkedIn, so you get these things from LinkedIn. There's 3 CEO jobs that you qualify for. And I'm thinking, no, not this girl.
Nah.
No.
Well, I think that's awesome that you're continuing to push your own envelope. And I think that's a very important message for other people to have as well, as keep pushing yourself to develop and be curious about what is out there, because there just is so much. And so I can't thank you enough for being on the show today. Like, I think your message was very important for other people to hear, especially because you don't have the beginning that many people have nowadays, where everyone goes to college. So to be able to create your own avenue outside of that aspect, I think is really important. I'm glad that you're able to show that today. So I appreciate you being on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I don't want anyone to think I'm saying don't go to college. If you've got the passion to learn and the desire for something that requires it, go for it. Go for it. Don't be afraid. Go for it. But if you're not there,
exactly,
good for you. Do something else. Right?
Exactly. So thank you again so much. I really appreciate it.
It's been a real joy, real pleasure.